Welcome to the African American Workers Union show, Hour of Power. I'm your host, Dr. Alfred Brown, Secretary-Treasurer of the Union. Our topic today is African Americans and the Pittsburgh construction industry. Institutional racism at its best. We'll be right back.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the idea of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Welcome back. Joining me today is the president of the African American Workers Union, Mr. Calvin K. Clinton. Welcome, Calvin.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Give us a little history on the background of unions in the United States.
Well, the history of the trade unions and the American trade unions started in 1869. Basically, it was relevant to the fact that in 1865, the emancipation of the slaves allowed for a lot of craftspeople that were working on former plantations and working as in pretty much sharecroppers or working in the skilled trades on plantations was left to their own devices to employ or apply their skills. So the 4 years later, the mostly white trade union persons were in a position where they felt like they were being competitively outbid for jobs or for various projects that involve skilled trades. Mm-hmm. So what we have today is an outcrop of what it was back then, which was basically a turn for exclusion, because when the Knights of Labor was first initiated, it actually had both black and white tradespeople. But as the time went by, as we went through Reconstruction and as we went through Jim Crow segregation and the periods up until even today, it's been pretty much the unions deciding that they would limit the number of African Americans in the skilled trades.
Down through the years back to 1931, there was an act that was enacted called the David Bacon Act. What was that about?
Well, the David Bacon Act was passed in 1931. So basically, at that point in time, the unions were mainly and predominantly and almost exclusively, the trade unions were white. And to help in their process of competing with skilled labor that was not a part of the unions, mm-hmm. They lobbied Congress to pass the David Bacon Act, which allowed for the prevailing wage, which means the local prevailing wage would be the law in terms of the amount of money that would be paid a worker. Now, when you were in a position where you were competing with someone that was not in the union, if it wasn't for the prevailing wage, in most cases, well, especially with publicly funded projects, that they would not be able to compete because people would outbid them. They would, and these people would be African Americans in many cases, and they would get the jobs that the union people could not get because of the price, and not because of the quality of the work, but because of the price that they were able to employ their skills as tradesmen.
So down through the years, there was actually an exclusion of African Americans through this process.
Yes, all through the Reconstruction and periods of Jim Crow segregation and leading up to periods even after the Civil Rights movement had come to full-fledged. become full-fledged. The reality was, when it came to construction, most times African Americans were locked out of the skilled trades and the building construction trade unions.
There was recently a movie that was put out, a CD, entitled "What Trouble Means," and it is about a gentleman called Nate Smith.
Yes.
What was his contribution to this effort?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the late, great Nate Smith, who I knew personally, was involved as a operating engineer with the operating engineers local. And this particular documentary that was created by Robert Morris University, and anybody that's interested in getting a copy should contact the Robert Morris University. They do sometimes put it on the channels regularly, sometime in September, October, where they will put that particular documentary out. But if you want to get the DVD, you'll have to get in touch with Robert Morris. Now, what is important about what Nate Smith did with Operation Dig, and what became also the Pittsburgh Plan, which moved to other cities like the Philadelphia Plan and others, the reality was that African Americans were being locked out. When they built Three Rivers Stadium, African Americans were being locked out of employment in construction. The percentage was 3%, actually lower than 3%, of African Americans that were a part of the traditional white-led trade unions. Mr. Nate Smith, with a lot of courage and character and vision and vision as to what he felt he could do to help African Americans get into the operating engineers locals, as far as being operating engineers. He was a journeyman in that particular field, so he had skills that he could pass on to and work with other African Americans that were being basically locked out of the publicly funded projects. Now, that documentary, What Trouble Means, is from the late 60s into the 70s. But the program itself was based upon the premise of people doing what they call pre-apprenticeship. And then through Nate Smith's program, and then eventually get into what they call the traditional unions. But there was some progress for a period of time, but the back door for the unions was quickly closed after the funding for the Operation Dig and the Pittsburgh Plan had been exhausted. So as a result, you had people in a generation that actually could take advantage of being a skilled craft worker in the unions for a period of time. And I believe that they didn't get up any further than 15% of the local of the workers. And they were always looking for a way to see that that the program actually failed. So, but it was a success in the sense that it spurred a lot of other initiatives in other cities and other plans that allowed for the fact to first recognize the problem. The problem was the African Americans were being discriminated against. Blacks were being discriminated against in terms of being in skilled trades. And unfortunately, till this day, we still have that problem. And that's what we're here to talk about, and that is, to provide a solution for it.
This concept of the backdoor approach was addressed by Carter G. Woodson, who said what concerning that concept?
Well, the one thing about going to the back door of any process is that it's illegitimate in most cases, and it usually doesn't work because of the fact that if you can't get in that front door, then the likelihood is whoever has control of the door is going to see that one of those doors shut at some point in time, or else you wouldn't need the back door. But Carter G. Woodson put it pretty clearly and I think succinctly in terms of what it means for, in this case, African Americans to go through a back door to get into construction or into unions. It says that if you can control a man's thinking you do not have to worry about his actions. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status, for he will seek it himself. If you make a man think he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one.
We'll be right back.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was.
Okay.
Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Welcome back. We'd like to touch on now, Mr. Clinton, the Jim Crow construction scheme. There are three components that address that particular topic: pre-apprenticeship, HUD Section 3 employment, and the so-called workforce development programs. Could you elaborate on those?
Okay, what we have termed as the with the African American Workers Union is the Jim Crow construction scheme. Okay, well, we all know that under Jim Crow segregation, that it was separate and unequal. That basically those advantages and those opportunities that were provided to the regular populace or the normal populace was denied African Americans, and as such, they tried to make people feel inferior, make a race feel inferior, that you were not qualified, that you were not, you were not justified in having the same opportunities as white Americans. Well, in the union business, that's exactly what they have tried to do and have continued to do. And so they've created these different programs that they don't put their own people into. Now, they don't put white young men and white men into these pre-apprenticeship programs at the scale and at the level that they do for African Americans. And that is both male and female. They develop these pre-apprenticeship programs, they say, to allow for people who are not qualified to be regular union apprentices. Well, the fact of the matter is that that's not true, that there are plenty of African Americans, men and women, that could go into the skilled trades apprenticeship programs and do well, and qualify and do well. And so the bottom line is that what they've done is they've created a separate industry for employment, for lower wages, for no benefits, for all the basics that you would get with regular union apprenticeship. They created a industry in which African Americans are relegated to. This is the same thing with the HUD Section 3 program, in the fact that they use lately there's been some comment of people saying, well, we built all these houses, but we had 69, 70 workers that worked under Section 3. Well, Section 3 is the bare minimum of wages, no benefits, and no future in regards to construction. And yet they relegate African Americans to that area because they populate most of these public housing areas. And they say, well, we're giving you a job. We're giving you something to do. We're giving you a way to make money. Now, it's not that it's not that they're going to give you the equal jobs that you would get with a union apprenticeship or a union worker, but it's where we relegate these folks, and that's why we consider it Jim Crow construction. The so-called workforce development. Many a times you'll have a major development going on, and if they don't get you involved in pre-apprenticeship, then they want to get you in Section 3 if it's a housing development, or they call it workforce development. Well, the workforce development is a farce in most cases. it still puts you in a position of inferiority. It still does not deal with the equality of incomes, benefits, pensions, career, of what you would have in a regular union apprenticeship program or a regular union worker, skilled trade worker. So as a result of this going on decade after decade after decade, you can see all these different developments take place, all this housing take place, all this new housing and new development, and millions of dollars spent, which we will get into. And at the same time, people stay just as impoverished as they ever were before they even started the projects.
One other term that's used to describe these types of approaches is one and done, which versus the union skill trade approach. And the one and done meaning that when the project's finished, they're finished.
Exactly.
Where union skilled apprentice programs means there is a continuum.
Yes.
They go from one job to another, and they have not a job, but actually a career.
Exactly.
And that's what a job is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a career that people go into rather than just a job.
Well, just to put that in perspective, an example of that would be hard hats to helmets.
The federal
program that they put forth for a lot of Iraqi vets and those coming back, veterans that were possibly going to get into construction, and they wanted them to transition into construction. I mean, after they finished their deployments and finished their terms with the service. And one thing that they said in a periodical that comes out for the U.S. Armed Services, they made clear when they were dealing with hard hats to helmets that you would not go into a program that was pre-apprenticeship. You would not be in a position of being a one and done type of person that's working in construction. And the very fact that they would make that clear to these veterans, to these Iraqi veterans and others, makes it clear that they know it's a program that does not work.
That doesn't work. Right. That there's no future in it. But unfortunately, that's what is being offered in the African American community. Average wages for journeyman union trade workers and apprentice run about what?
Well, before we get into that, what I'd like to say is we're talking about substance versus symbolism. Union apprenticeship or union skill crafts is about substance. It's about a career. It's about a future. Whereas you're talking about a pre-apprenticeship, Section 3 earnings or wages, or workforce development programs that only last for as long as the funds are there for the people that run the programs. That's talking about symbolism. It's symbolic. It's a token process. It is a Jim Crow way of approaching a very serious economic opportunity for any community, for any race of people, for any ethnicity. But just to highlight what it is that we're speaking about here before I give you the actual figures, is that the wages, the benefits, the certified training, the career track over multiple projects, and the advancement opportunities. You could become a journeyman. As you matriculate, you become a journeyman. You could become a master in one particular field or another, whether it's a carpenter, electrician, plumber, whether it's bricklayer or whomever of the different skilled trades. It is the only one of the major ways, I would say, for a person with a high school diploma and a GED to be solidly in the middle class in this country. And but what they offer many times is a temporary Jim Crow job for African Americans in particular. Now, the average journeyman union skilled trades worker makes currently averaged $48.95 an hour.
I think you need to say that again.
Yeah, the average journeyman union skilled trades worker makes about $48.95 an hour when you're speaking of both wage and benefits. A matriculating apprentice, union apprentice, makes about $34.42 per hour. And in essence, what you're looking at is a way in which a person coming out of high school or has a high school or a GED, which many security guards have, which many restaurant workers have, which many other service workers have that are in the African American community, could be making this money if they choose to go into construction, if they had a fair opportunity to do so. African Americans are relegated normally to these pre-apprenticeship programs. If they live in public housing, and they might into public housing basically. If you go into a Section 3 program, and you might make $10 to $15. But these are temporary jobs. Then when those contractors move on to another job, when the unions move their people on to another job, you're not going with them. There might be a few token people that they may allow, or they see that they're good workers, and they say, well, and that's not to say the other people aren't good workers, it's just the fact that they only want to have a few. And the reality is that they'll might move them on to the next project, or might indenture them into the union as a carpenter or a bricklayer or one other skilled trade. They may. But in most cases, they don't. And 95% of people in pre-apprenticeship never end up being in a union skilled trade program. They never get indentured, because the reality is it's all a farce from the beginning. They don't want to go into a black community, do all these houses, and then have all kinds of protests and people doing things that might be disruptive to their making money, constructing their houses. So, it's getting to a point, though, that I've seen so many situations where African Americans, especially African American men, where white men are working and black men are watching. And if they're walking by, then they're watching and walking. But the reality is that they're not given the opportunity to participate. And it's gotten to a point whereas some people just feel like it's out their reach. So they don't even complain about it. They just accept it. And that is something that I would hope is something that could be changed, and we're working for, to change here in Pittsburgh. One thing that was of note that was made about these pre-apprenticeship programs as such, some of our staff visited Mayor Peduto's office. And one of his representatives said, it's better for him to have something rather than nothing. Now, just think if the civil rights movement trying to fight Jim Crow segregation was to take that particular principle, take that position, that something was better than nothing, we would still be in segregation. We would still be second-class citizens.
Exactly.
And in 2015, for this to be happening in Pittsburgh, where our people are suffering, and it's, quite frankly, a nationwide issue, whether you go to Baltimore, Ferguson, whether you go to all these other cities that have had all these different problems and uproars over the past several years. The reality is, when they always look for the fact that, well, what's causing all this uproar and all this problem and rioting possibly in these cities, the one thing that usually comes up is the fact that the social economic situation of African Americans across this country is so dire in some communities that when you have a little spark, then you've got an explosion. And that explosion is born out of whether it's police brutality or whatever, but at the heart of it is social economic depravity. It's about the economic system of our country that has excluded African Americans to the point of total frustration. So, especially our young people. So at this point, we're looking forward to doing things different here in Pittsburgh. We hope that we can get the support we need to do it, and we can avoid what could happen in Pittsburgh, that's happened in Baltimore, that's happened in Ferguson, and whatever. It's just a matter of time, because the fact of the matter is you cannot exclude people at this level with this large of an industry. The construction industry across this nation is a $500 billion plus industry. And we will get into some of the details even here in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Now, African Americans pay federal, state, county, city taxes, both directly and indirectly. And in reality, we have no return on investment. All of these projects that are happening in the Pittsburgh area are in part funded by the federal and state government. And that's African American communities' dollars. But there's no return on our investment. It's like taxation without representation. The money's coming in, but the jobs aren't. What do you say?
Well, from the periods of Renaissance 2, Renaissance 3, Renaissance 2 was when relevant to when Mr. Nate Smith and the community of Pittsburgh rose up to say that they wanted a share of the pie in terms of construction. Renaissance 3 has occurred, and it is totally outrageous that in 2015, and even in the decade that's preceded this, that you would have all this publicly funded economic development projects that politicians push for jobs, and that we pay taxes for out of the African American community. And then at the end of the day, they can build PNC Park for $216 million, Heinz Field for $281 million, expansion of the David L. Lawrence Convention Center, $375 million, Consol Energy Center, $321 million. All the residential development, when you speak of Oak Hill, Bedford Square, East Liberty development types of developments, Garfield Commons, which combined was over $200 million. South, and let me include actually Bakery Square, was $135 million. The Highland, right now, they're doing the Bakery Square 2, is $120 million. East Liberty Transit Center, $137 million. YMC development, where they're converting the YMCA right now, $23 million. We're speaking of over $2.5 billion that have spent publicly for construction projects. And yet, we have a situation with African Americans being in some of the highest poverty tracts in the city of Pittsburgh. At the same time, a recent study by the Workforce Diversity Indicators Initiative concluded minorities here dominate low-wage jobs. Now, that can't be true if we were involved in construction and we were getting the prevailing wage, but that is the fact. A national study that was done by Wallet Hub of Washington, D.C. concluded that Pittsburgh was one of the least diverse cities by race and ethnicity in the U.S. The city ranked 227 out of 230 major cities in the nation. Erie, PA was the dead last one. So in Western Pennsylvania, it makes clear that African Americans are not being treated fairly, equitably in economic issues. And it not only affects the adults, because last month, the Annie E. Casey Foundation study indicated that with the Kids Count data book, that a number of PA children, the number of PA children living in poverty is on the rise. Now, we have all this development going on. We have all these different opportunities, economic opportunities that are taking place. And yet you still have the downward trend in terms of the upliftment of persons with employment in the African American community in this city and in this county and this region.
And the generational poverty continues in all the sections of town where there is primarily black communities.
Exactly.
The Hill District, East Liberty, Homewood, North Side, South Side, all of these areas continue, and even the reports of major help organizations in the city here continue to say that the poverty persists. But one of the things that they somehow don't include is any solution. It exists, it persists,
yes,
but they don't present any solution. Now, we're aware that there's no one solution to these multitude of problems, but there's a beginning place. And I think that you would agree with me that our solution, in part, can make a difference.
It will make a difference and can make a difference if we get the support from the African American community and those of fair-mindedness in the white community. These are realities. You get in from the building construction trade councils and the trade unions that are involved. No one really audits the numbers that they have of their demographics of their unions. And but if you can see anecdotally, most times, you pass by construction sites all the time and you barely see an African American. And if you see 2 or 3, then you feel like, well, there's something going on here. There's something maybe of a positive nature. But the reality is that African Americans in the traditional unions has never been of proportion to the population and the qualified population of the communities. The reality of what we are trying to do is to open up a front door for African Americans and other, and we're not a discriminatory union. We would have whites as well as blacks in our union halls, but the reality is that African Americans would probably share a number of people in the union hall because of the fact that they most likely would be the ones that were basically more locked out than they would be if they were in the traditional unions. But when we speak about this racism and institutional racism that people don't like to talk about because they feel like, oh, that's just such a polarizing subject or whatever. But, our people live a life in these communities that is horrid.
No.
It is horrid. And the reality of waking up every day and trying to get something that a lot of people take for granted, whether it's a job or career, is frustrating, especially to our young men. And that's not to exclude the young women as well. But the reality is young men wake up, and what is their reality of life living in a poor black community?
What are their expectations?
What's the hope? Where are the dreams? Where are the things that make people motivated to progress, to understand? And see, some of that we talk about the school systems and we talk about how, whether or not African Americans are progressing or young students are progressing. In fact, in spite of all the difficulties, graduation rates for African Americans in Pennsylvania are increasing. And in fact, leveling on par with white students as far as high school diploma. So don't give me this idea that our people aren't qualified to get into regular union apprenticeship. Don't give me that. There's too many of them working as security guards with a high school diploma. There's too many of them working in restaurants with a high school diploma. There are too many of them that are working in service jobs that are usually given to them after they've built these projects that have a high school diploma or a GED. So it's just a matter of whether or not we want to look at it from the reality of what it is as opposed to what you projected out there to be, the window dressing of what it's supposed to be. And that has to change. Because if they're talking about Black Lives Matter, then Black lives should count.
Should count.
And if we don't count, and our people must count as well as be counted. So we see where we're being denied opportunities. We see it in construction, and it's up to us to do something about it. It's up to us, like Nate Smith and his generation did, to say, listen, enough is enough. We're tired of our young men out there, and if they either got to choose between, in many cases, a low-wage job or the drug trade. There's too many of them that's making that fork in the road, choosing to go, I'm not going to work at $7 or $8 an hour, and I can make this kind of money out in the street. This is the reality, and it's a racist reality. Because even as we speak today, in Colorado, there are tons of people making millions of dollars off marijuana. And I don't know how many brothers and sisters got felonies on their record from trying to trade marijuana for money. And that's what they're doing in Denver, in Colorado. That's what they're doing in other states now, legally, and making millions of dollars. And I mean, so there has to be some change there. There has to be some understanding as to how we change a industry that is as big as it is and as populous as it is in our community, in our city, and still excluding African Americans the way they're doing it. There has to be a change.
Okay. Right now we have an initiative that we are asking for the support of the community that is imperative that we get, that it can be a success to change the way things are in the construction industry and in the Western Pennsylvania to begin with, and the potential to even go further. And that initiative is what, sir?
Yes, well, we have a solution. We are certified to provide union apprenticeship training in 15 different skill trades. Our particular solution is to provide for that union training for African Americans and others. And our number right now is for 300 apprentices. We would have 100 journeymen that would be involved in the training of these apprentices. We have sought support from Governor Tom Wolf in regards to funding our program. And we look forward to a positive response, because what we are looking at in terms of real numbers for African Americans under this program is close to $17 million in wages that could be garnered from working on projects that are in the city of Pittsburgh, that are about to begin in the city of Pittsburgh. One in particular is the Lower Hill redevelopment. It doesn't make sense that you would have all this other development that has taken place in the Hill District and in East Liberty and in other parts of the city, but predominantly African American communities, and at the same time still have the higher poverty tracts that are a part of that community in terms of actually people being economically progressed. So the reality is that we want to change that, especially with the Lower Hill redevelopment project. And we want to bring in, through the front door, a number of African Americans that are male and female that want to become carpenters, plumbers, electricians, bricklayers, cement masons, on down the line, and give them the opportunity to work in their communities to empower themselves. And I mean really empower people. I'm not talking about empowering an organization through using these different programs that are not really returning any investment on our publicly funded dollars. We're talking about empowering people so they don't have to come back to you again. They're a part of you. In our case, a union. They're a part of the union. As the union grows, they grow, and as they grow, we grow. But we're not talking about some project whereas every year you have to go begging for funds so that you can continue to put on this charade to say that you're impacting African Americans in a positive and economic way in terms of self-determination, in terms of empowerment, in terms of them having a career. That game has got to stop. It's over. And it's time for us as a people to support efforts that really make a difference and are going to make a difference for the future of our communities.
When you think of return on investment, with those 400 people that we're talking about, the 100 journeymen and 300 apprentices, they have the potential to generate over $16 million in the first year of full employment. Think about that. Having over $16 million coming into your community. Right now, you have that much and more going out of your community, because every time one of these projects are done, the individuals who actually build them get in their SUVs or their F-150s and go into their community with that money that they received on that project. What do you think would happen in your community if you had over $16 million coming into it in just 1 year through only 400 people? And then you can multiply that as the projects grow and as they go from one project to another. Mm-hmm. We're talking about significant difference. You wouldn't have to have your son or your daughter go through some project to go to college. You could send them to college yourself. You can finance it just like they do in other areas of the city for their children. I was looking at a commercial the other day, and it was about a police officer who had some type of medical problem, and he was saying that when he had this medical problem, I'm not sure if it was a heart attack or a stroke or something, but he was saying the different things that was going through his mind when this was happening to him. And one of the things that came going through his mind was, how am I going to send my children to college? And you know, those are the types of things that people with a job worry about. That's the types of things with people with a well-earning job have to make decisions about. And the African-American community can have those same considerations and same concerns when they're making the type of money that they should, and they'll be able to do like everyone else, buy a home. Everyone else send their children to college. Only 1% of the workforce on the Console Center was African American. Now, there are many working in that center now, but none of them are sending kids to college, and none of them are building any homes. They're making below minimum wage, and in many cases are part-time. This is what we're trying to change. This is what we need your help in changing in the greater Pittsburgh area at this time. Mr. Clinton?
Well, our solution is not based upon the fact that we could solve all the problems in the African American community. No one industry and no one organization and no one group of people are going to be able to do it. It's a myriad of things and people that need to respond to the dire situation in a lot of African American communities. But what we can say is that in our particular process, we can change the dynamics and we can start the change of opportunity for African Americans in the construction industry. It is true, our numbers are smaller than theirs. It is true that our experience is going to be less than theirs in the sense that we haven't been involved with construction since, well, we started in 1998, but as far as our certifications and such. But the reality is that at the end of the day, when they build the Lower Hill redevelopment, when they build the Hazelwood redevelopment, now I'm speaking of the Lower Hill redevelopment, you're speaking about an $800 million project. It's going to take over close to 10 years. The Hazelwood redevelopment estimated to be about $1 billion. Addison Terrace where they speak about people being hired through Section 3. But the real numbers are how many people were union workers that were making the prevailing wage, that were getting the benefits, that were building their pensions, that were building a career. How many of them were African Americans? Our numbers indicate that we will be able to provide, through our program, $16,192,000 in the first full year of employment for people working with our union. And that would be a return on investment of over 22 times what we're asking Governor Wolf to help us with in regards to the program. So ask yourself, basically, how many times have you had anybody or any type of industry, whereas someone could give you 22 times the investment? Wall Street can't even beat that on their investment. So it's up to the community to rally for your son, for your daughter, for your nephew, for your grandson, and for those that you see languishing in communities without opportunity, where they have the ability to progress and get a middle-class job. It's up to you to support that. And if you want it bad enough, you will, and we will, I promise you, we will come through to get exactly what everyone we have said that would be a part of that 400 group of people, to get the income of that $16,192,000 in the first full year of operation.
We'll be right back.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the idea of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Okay, I'll build it in there.
Welcome back. What we'd like to touch on now is what you can do to be a part, what you can do to help, how you can support us to achieve what we need to achieve so that you can achieve what you need to achieve. Mr. Clinton?
Well, there are things that you can do to support what we're trying to do. One is that you can contact Governor Tom Wolf's office, and you can give support to the African American Workers Union in terms of our program and our plans. You can also contact your state representative, because it's important, especially those areas in which this construction takes place, for you to let them know that you want to see these opportunities for your children, and that you're not going to be accepting of these Jim Crow types of programs in the future. We've had 40 years, almost 50 years of them, and you can see where we're at. Also, you can attend a Black Labor Conference that we're going to hold on Labor Day, September the 7th, at 12 p.m., and that's at One Hope Square building at 1901 Center Avenue in the Hill District. At that particular Black Labor Conference, which is one of the first, and as far as I know, the first Black Labor Conference that's really been held, when we could speak about the issues of black labor, like Labor Day participants, other unions and others do every year, because they want to see what's the pulse. What's the pulse of a community? What's the pulse of a city? What's the pulse of a state in terms of the economic pulse? And what's the pulse of a nation? Where do we fit in? How much are we gaining? How much are we losing? What has been the effects of what we're trying to do? So we want to discuss those things at this Black Labor Conference. We also want to talk about minority business, which many times African Americans are given the business when it comes to minority business, because the statistics are not the truth. And we want to explain some of how that works and why you can have all this money that they say that we've made through minority business, and at the same time, our communities still look like they've, like Beirut in some instances. So we want you to attend the Black Labor Conference. We want you to give us support by contacting the governor's office and your state representative, and we would appreciate that, and we want to reciprocate by helping your children and your relatives get a fair piece of the pie and get out of this Jim Crow status that we have in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this racism at its best, institutional racism at its best, which is construction in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
We want to thank you for tuning in to the African American Workers Union Hour of Power. One of the things that we have strived to do through the history of our union is to be accountable. And I think that's something that we hear many times concerning politicians and others, but the African American Workers Union wants to be accountable. We want your support, and we want to be able to show to you and to give to you our results of your support. So accountability is something that is very important to us and should be very important to you. Thank you, and may God bless you.